In this video, we're just going to look at the sheet set as it stands so far and just pay attention to the careful placement of annotations and drawings and overall composition of the sheets, just so that we can see that in fact what we have created abides by all of the good graphic standards and industry standards that we have developed so far. Now, even though we've worked really hard on this sheet set, there are still maybe some tiny little nitpicky things that a trained eye would notice. And it's not anything that we need to change, but there may be some things that were we to do this again, we might be a little bit more sensitive to. So let's go ahead and take a look. Your sheet set might look slightly different than mine because you hopefully will have your name and some information along this title bar right here. Other than that, this sheet looks pretty good. We do have the same margins both on the left side of the drawing and the right side, and this margin looks to be about equal between these two drawing sets here. Line weight looks very consistent throughout. But one thing that I did notice as I was doing some grading is that I would actually have drawn one little line right here because there should be a line right there because that's the edge of the drawing. And that's the edge of the slab, and that should have a little indicator right there. Other than that, this sheet looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and move along. So this is our drawing A101, and you can see here that we have all the tags and the labels and the dimension lines and everything has built towards this beautiful whole. And this drawing itself looks pretty good. But now looking at this, I would say if I was critiquing this drawing, that there's a little bit of messiness on the scan up here. So we would just maybe wipe off our scanner and be a little bit more careful about that in the future. The rest of the drawing itself looks pretty good. Some people might have ran this north arrow either and justified everything to this left edge of the drawing here, and maybe shortened this down here on this edge. But it looks good. It's centered on either side here. The drawing label is centered on either side. So that's a picky thing that could be changed by someone who might have a different preference. But again, overall, this drawing looks very good too. You can see that there's a slight difference between the placement of this label on this side versus the label on this side. There's a little bit more margin here. I bet if you drew an invisible line on the very top of this set of words here, there might be a little bit less difference or maybe just about the same between these two labels. So that's working, it looks like pretty well. Other than that, this drawing looks really good. Okay, our next drawing is the elevation set. And again, this set looks good too. Not a whole lot to critique here. But again, notice the really consistent margins on the left and right and in between the drawings. You could, if you were really picky, reduce this difference here so that it's the same as the one on the left and right. But again, these aren't things that we need to change right now. This is just if we were going to be extra picky and be super critical. But overall, line weight looks good. There's a clear differentiation between the profile lines, the change of plane lines, and the texture lines here. All the drawing labels are aligned. You can see down here, both with each other and with the edges of the drawing. You could, if you wanted to, be a little bit more consistent with the window glazing lines here. Some people like a little bit of variety in the placement. Some like them all to be the same. Some people like this a little like a pair of or a set of three here, whereas other people like more parallel lines, just a pair of them. But overall, this set looks excellent as well. Okay, this drawing is looking good here. Maybe just a little bit of messiness up here at the top of the wall section above here. Maybe it could be a scanner issue, but probably maybe just a little bit of extra pen on that side. Again, nothing to fix, but something to be aware of. I hope that your change of plane lines are a little bit thinner than mine here. Mine look a little bit thick. Same thing here, they look a little bit thick. The drawing sections on this page I'm pretty happy with. Nice differentiation between profile, change of plane, and texture lines. Maybe just a little bit of overlap on that corner of the slab there could have been avoided now looking at it a second time. But other than that, the other places where there's some overlap, it's unavoidable. And we did the best we could. But this looks great as well. All right, now that we look at our sheet A104, you can see here really nice alignment on the left side. A little bit of difference in the margins on the right-hand side, but unfortunately there wasn't really a whole lot to do to change that, because we would have had to drop this down onto the second line. So that we wanted to try to avoid, because we really then would have, everything else would have had to slide down. Looking at this from the position of critique instead of the position of the person who drafted it, it's possible that you could have slid all of these notes down, but the issue with that is that you would have had to then extend leaders with elbows in them, and sometimes that can visually look a little bit messy. So if you wanted to see it, or if you know, you wanted to present that option to your boss or whoever was looking at this sheet set, you could you know, show it both ways and then decide. Maybe a little bit of line weight thickness issue here makes it a little bit difficult to see. Other than that, I think that this page looks pretty good. Now the only issue is, you know, visually I'm always wanting to align the edge of this with the edge of this drawing, and you may be wanting that too with regard to composition. But again, keep in mind that that's going to create a big negative space here. And we, if you looked at the learning unit, we want to make sure that we avoid blank spaces on the rightmost side of the drawing, because that requires us to unroll it more than necessary to see what's on the drawing itself. And we want to try to avoid any rolling and unrolling of drawings, because it kind of can crumple up the sheet set a little bit. So we want to be careful about that. A little bit of over pen mark on this corner here, and not quite a perfect meeting of the edges here. I would have slid this over had I done it again, so center that a little bit more. But overall, this sheet looks very good. Again, notice the alignment of all the labels down here, and that they start on the leftmost edge of the drawing and end on the rightmost edge. They don't extend all the way to the end of the notes, although some people might prefer that method. Okay, now looking at our schedule sheet here, overall this is really nicely laid out, really good margins between, especially on the doors. A little bit of a difference here on the left side versus, a little bit of a difference on the right side versus the left side here. We could have scooted that over just a little bit more, but I was thinking about these three doors as being sort of their own individual unit, as opposed to being separate from this. So just visually, that's why I didn't scoot them all the way over to the right, but you could have. It wouldn't have been wrong to do that. Now notice here, I don't have the changes filled in yet between what's on the ceiling finish and height, but your drawing set should have those. And then same thing with the wall finishes here. We could have taken this whole set down and just equalized the margin between this and this. But other than that, this sheet is laid out very nicely. Okay. Design plan, again, this, you know, it's really difficult, because you always want to say, oh, it'd look better if we textured the entire floor. But we don't really know how that would look until we actually did it. And so it can get really, really distracting, especially if later on there's more things that needed to be added to this plan. So for right now, it looks good. I also have seen people texture the underside of vellum before, so that the textures themselves show up even lighter. And that's an option too. But for the most part, this is looking really good because it's in the same location. You know, even though we've added layers to it and we've added this finished legend, the placement of the drawing on the sheet hasn't changed, even though it's been through several iterations. Looking at this now, I probably, you probably could have scooted this one over just a bit. But again, it looks very professional and clean the way that it is. And it's generally speaking aligned up to the left side wall. Equidistance on the left and right side of the drawing, even though the finished legend is sort of imposing on that negative space there. But again, we're really seeking for the plans to not bounce around too much across sheets. We want to have them always centered on the drawing. So that looks very good. Notice then that all the textures here have been placed so as not to overlap any of the room text. And that's really important. No clarity is lost when the textures have been added. Okay. The reflected ceiling plan, we've seen this several times by this point, and it's just so full of information that it's really sort of, we're sort of like that it all fits on the sheet to begin with. But you can see here, there's a nice difference between the left side and the right side margins, and then the consistent margin on the center. We do have dimension lines on both sides, and then notice these are symmetrical dimension lines. So that was a nice effect, even though it doesn't run the full width of the drawing. They are sort of equally placed. Very little overlap of information, even though there's tons and tons and tons of content. The only thing that always sort of makes this plan difficult for me to look at is the confusion of the dimension lines on this side. But again, it just takes a second of really paying close attention to see that the dimension lines here are not aligned with the dimension lines of the acoustical ceiling tile, and that's what makes it a little bit easier and clearer to read. There wasn't a whole lot of room to put the north arrow anywhere, and I didn't want to move it up so that there would be a little bit more consistency with this drawing label drawn all the way to the left of this plan, because then we wouldn't have had room for the north arrow, and I did not want to all of a sudden pop it up above the label. So that's why it's placed the way that it is. Some viewers might say, well, why didn't you bring this label all the way down here so that it was aligned with this one? And it was because I wanted there to be equidistance between the top and the bottom of this particular drawing, although it wouldn't have been wrong to align it. It's just, again, coming back to personal preference. So hopefully you've looked at this drawing set now with a second set of eyes. It's always very difficult to look at something both as the creator and also as the critic, but it's important to be able to sort of clear your mind and look at it from a different perspective, and just realize that a drawing set is never really done. It's the best it can be in the time that it's allowed. But you all have created a really beautiful drawing set, and the things that we might look at now compositionally that we would change doesn't make the set that you have wrong. It just means that there's several ways of making a beautiful sheet and several ways of making a beautiful drawing set, and that personal preference and personal taste really does weigh into the good graphic design and good composition. But as long as you're following the rules that have been outlined for you, and that there's no overlap, that there's consistency in the placement, that there's a care to how the sheet has been laid out, that the information is there, and that you're consistent, your drawing set will look good, and you should feel confident presenting it to anybody.